Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Music Made Me. Thank you so much for joining us once again. We truly do appreciate it. Today we have an awesome conversation with Andrew Farriss. He is one of the founding members of one of Australia's most successful musical groups ever, INXS. We talked to Andrew about his musical beginnings, the formation of INXS, and the highs and lows that he rode with the band over the years. We also talked about his solo project, which kicked off at the beginning of 2020. So please enjoy our conversation with Andrew Farriss. I want to start back in high school when you first sort of started in band life. And originally you had Dr. Dolphin was your very first band?
Yeah, it was one of them. Yeah, but let me go a little bit before that. I'll make it brief.
Sure.
Okay. Obviously, I was born in Cottesloe, near the beach in Perth, in Western Australia.
Right.
My dad had been in the Royal Navy. Okay, and he hadn't been back to see my grandparents or his parents for 15 years. So we all got on a ship, and 3 weeks later we went to London in 1964, and we went to a variety show, and I saw the Beatles. That was the first band I saw.
Right. I was going to ask you about that, but I didn't know if you wanted to go back that far. But I was wondering if you remember anything about that show.
Yeah, I do. I can remember the television cameras. Actually, because they were like big pterodactyls moving backward and forward, and everyone was going nuts over this band. And I'd never even seen a band. I was just a little kid. I'm like, what's the big deal with these guys? As I'm sitting there, and then afterwards, later on in my life, my older brother Tim. We were talking about it one day, and we asked my dad when he was alive, what was that? What was that all about? And he goes, yeah, you went and talked to him afterwards. I'm like, no, wow. I shouldn't say that. But anyway, I'm thinking that's bizarre. Anyway,
yeah.
But that was probably a thing that really kind of, when I saw that, how excited people could get about music, that was probably something that was important. And the next thing was I learned to play piano when I was about 9. Mm-hmm. And then I taught myself to play guitar because I used to sneak into my brother's bedroom and play his guitar. And so, I was teaching myself to do that. And then, but now we come into high school years. Yeah. And I had, sort of young high school bands that I was in, and I was a singer, actually. I was still writing songs, and we were playing whatever we were playing. Well, yeah, I still wrote songs back then. And then I met Michael Hutchence. He came in through the schoolyard, and he wasn't in a band. He was, he was into motorbikes, actually, as I remember.
Oh, okay.
And and we got talking about bikes, and he said, why don't you come over and check out my motorbike? I said, sure, man. So I come over and I had a look, and it was pretty cool. And he was taking the thing apart and fixing it and stuff. And then we talked not very much about music. And then later on, we sort of became a bit better friends. And then we started talking about music, and he'd come along and seen some of the bands I had or whatever. And then one thing led to another, and he always was really, really good with poetry, prose, So we started writing a lot together, and then that's kind of how our songwriting partnership started, even though we didn't realize we were forming that. That's where that connection happened when we were pretty much teenagers. And then he went over to Los Angeles. He went to North Hollywood High School because his family had sort of gone different ways. And then when he came back again, I had already kept going with my bands and done other things. But when he came back, he changed a lot. He had long hair, and he was completely kind of, he'd been influenced, I think, by other things. And one thing led to another. And, then we started forming what became and turned into Dr. Dolphin, like you said. Mm-hmm. And then eventually that led to INXS. Yeah.
And there was the Vegetables before that, right? Before INXS, before?
Well, actually, before INXS, we were the Farriss brothers, because I got two brothers as well, Tim and John.
Yeah.
And the brothers, and Kirk Pengilly and Gary Beers and Michael, we were the Farriss brothers. But I think that probably drove Michael nuts, because he was singing,
Right. Yeah.
As was Kirk, actually, in those years. And so but then we changed the name to INXS, and I guess for what people know of that, as the rest is history.
Yeah,
but now I'm doing what I'm doing,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And let's talk about what you're doing. So INXS, following Michael's passing, had a few different singers. You guys kind of continued for a little while. Your last show was November 2012, I believe.
I think that sounds about right. Yeah.
Right. And then since that time, have you been writing for yourself? Because I know you've done a lot of producing and writing for others, but during that time as well, were you doing a lot of writing for yourself, getting prepared for an eventual release, or did that come later on?
Well, when I look at awards and accolades and things, all I can say is, and I've been fortunate to have had these things during my career and my life, is
Right.
that an award, like let's say a platinum record, is no use to you unless you have a life to hang it on. You know,
Right.
the accolade, if your life's a complete disaster, it doesn't mean that much. So, your life, and to me as a songwriter, the quality of your life, is the same thing. And how can you write songs that connect with people unless you are connected with reality and you have a life that you can connect with people when you're writing a song? Because otherwise you can't connect with anybody because you're in a different headspace,
Right.
and
Yeah.
so right, and physically, emotionally, or whatever, intellectually. But I think for me, my journey really started, not so much as, oh well, I'll go make an album now. As you had pointed out, and we've been talking about, I've always written songs. And even during that period, even way back when, before INXS stopped performing, I was still writing, in the old days. And I didn't necessarily use those songs with
Right.
anybody. I just kept them in the background, like on the shelf. And then I realized as it went along, I thought, well, I've made all these sort of recordings of songs, and there were new songs, very new songs too, but they all sounded different because they'd been recorded with different instruments on different machines over different eras and time. Some were old analog recordings, some were very modern digital recordings. I didn't know what to do with all these recordings, and because they sounded all over the place. So I
Right.
started re-recording these songs, and then I started singing them because I was the closest singer around. So I started singing them, and then I thought that someone, if they didn't like my voice, like say the Nashville, recording engineers would say, "Look, hey Andrew, we'll get someone in to sing this. What do you think?"
Oh,
They
okay.
didn't. They said, "Well, we like your voice. Keep singing." I'm like, "Oh, really? Okay. Well, I'll keep doing it." But the real game changer for me came when I took a horse riding holiday trip with my wife, Marlena, who's from Dayton in Ohio. And that's about 5.5 hours drive to Nashville. We went down to the Mexican border and we rode horses along an area called the Chiricahua Mountains, where the Apache Indians were, and where you had the tumultuous histories of these people. You had the U.S. cavalry, places like Apache Pass, Cochise's stronghold, the old abandoned U.S. cavalry forts. You had the Mexican people across the border, and the old days of Mexican army. All up the road, you had Tombstone with the cowboys and outlaws, and you had the settlers trying to make something, a life amongst all this chaos. And we rode horses through these wilderness areas for 6 hours a day for 6 days straight. And at the end of it, I came back to Nashville in a writing session, and the first song I think I wrote that became the beginning of my album was Apache Pass. I wrote that with Frank Myers, and
Right.
he's about my age, and and I loved writing that song with Frank. Frank's an awesome writer, and I just want to say thanks, Frank, if you're out there, if you ever hear this. I just want to say thanks, and that's where my journey really started to record my album. It was right there. Yeah.
And what was it like thinking about recording an album and stepping to the front now and being in the spotlight? Was that scary for you, or was it pretty exciting in taking that leap?
Well, yeah, I mean, I over the years, especially with INXS, in the end, we played the biggest stages in the world, and we played the smallest stages in the world in parts of our career. And I know what the difference was. And I think the toughest job for any artist or musician, songwriter, is when people don't know your material.
Right.
When you walk out cold onto a stage and nobody knows who you are, the best way, out of that scenario is to play someone else's song that everybody knows well, because then you're gonna go down well. But it can be really, really testing when you walk out on a stage and nobody knows your material, you know.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it can be really hard actually. And because everyone's like, what's this? You know, and it's sort of, bit nebulous at first, but I'm fortunate because of my background that I had with INXS, where I have those songs I can draw on that I wrote or co-wrote. I wrote a lot of them. So to me, it's important to me to keep that in the back of my mind. But I've been really enjoying the journey. I have a fantastic band of musicians, country musicians playing with me at the moment. I'm having a great time.
And did you have to watch where your expectations were at? Because, like you say, at the end of the INXS run, like you were playing the biggest stadiums out there. And so, did you
Mm.
have to go into this project realizing that it might not start like that and you might have to start near the bottom doing the smaller venues and just having fun with it?
Yeah, that's the word, is have fun with it. And when I first seriously considered the idea of what I'm doing, which is promoting what I'm doing now and playing live and in this country western genre that I've gone into, you know, the music I'm doing, I did promise my wife Marlena and that, look, if this is enjoyable, we'll keep doing it. But if it doesn't become enjoyable, I'll stop doing it.
Right.
And because I want to, actually, it sounds selfish, I just want to have a good time doing it. I don't have any other reason really why I have to do it. I'm just feel fortunate that I can do it, so I'm out there doing it.
And
Yeah.
you've done it for so long. Has there ever been a point over any of it where it has felt like a job, or over your entire career, has it always been fun?
Look, especially during the INXS years, I mean, we worked in 52 countries. And of course, you had the terrible tragedy with Michael's suicide and all
Hmm.
that sort of thing, all those kind of personal experiences. They don't help in many ways to make it like, oh, okay, well, it's like a roller coaster. You have really big highs and then really big lows, and you get big
Right.
highs. And after a while, you get, can we have something in the middle, please? But I miss Michael, and he was my friend, and we all
Hmm.
miss him. And, he was an incredibly talented performer and songwriter. And yeah, I miss him, a lot.
Are you in the middle now, or have you found a place in the middle?
Yeah, I think, well, I'm not so much middle of the road. I wouldn't call what I'm doing middle of the road at all. In fact, I love outlaw country. I like old school country and modern country too, but I like blending it all together. So to me, I feel like I like exploring some of history with music and culturally as well, including in Australia. There's one of my songs is with the Kelly Gang. That I noticed you guys have picked up on, which surprised me because it's about an Australian bushranger outlaw guy. And I
Right.
noticed that Canadians are really curious about that song. And to me, I was like, that's the last song that I thought, Canadians would be interested in, because, it's a song about an Australian bushranger.
What has been your reaction to how people have taken it? And you released your EP first, which wasn't necessarily the plan, but with the way everything worked out and the response from how
Right.
it went and with the releases and what people are saying, how does it make you feel?
Well, yeah, I'm actually quite excited. I mean, so far, so good. I mean, when I embarked on this, I didn't, like I said, I didn't want to, I didn't expect anything really. I just wanted to make music because I was enjoying it, and I was stimulated intellectually and as a songwriter, because I finally had boundaries of how I would write my album. Before that, I wasn't sure. I didn't want to do the pop thing of just getting 12 songs that would suit, some sort of chart genre and then
Right.
throw that out. I didn't feel comfortable with that. I could have done that. That's not quite what I wanted to do. When I suddenly realized that the cultural part of it, both Australian culture, old world culture, and US, Canadian old world culture, the bringing of instruments in from Europe that became country folk music and all that sort of thing, and then turned into inspiring people like Willie Nelson. He wanted to be a cowboy. That way I thought was always curious. And I have a farm that I live on, I've owned for many years, and I have cattle and grains when it rains. And I really am a cowboy, even though people don't think of me like that. And, I've fallen off horses and I've mustered cattle. I've done all kinds of things. So when I did this horse riding trip, it just suddenly I realized, you know what, Andrew, you need to combine all this stuff. You need to be who you are in your time. But at the same time, I'm talking about an older time, a frontier time, pre-electricity, even.
Right. And I've seen some articles that say there was one that I think the quote was sort of like, it's surprising that the album doesn't sound like INXS. And I was kind of surprised at that because I don't know why people would just automatically think that it's going to sound like that. So, was it your goal to create something that was your own, that was very personal for you? Obviously,
Yeah,
it was because that's what you've kind of been
yeah.
saying, right?
Well, right. And well, first of all, I pay respect to INXS. What an awesome band. I know how good they are because I played with them. And
Yeah,
they're amazing musicians. And I miss Michael, like I said. But yeah, when it came to doing my own music, also it's a completely different music genre. I'm working with instruments that INXS wouldn't have ever normally used,
right.
pedal steels and mandolins, mandolas, fiddles, and these kind of old world instruments. And instead of perhaps using electronic technology that I was using, say, 35 years ago, like loops and beats and, sort of EDM based stuff or whatever, that kind of digital technology, I didn't want to do that. I actually wanted instead to replace all that technology with old school instruments.
And was that different in the writing then, in using those
Yeah.
instruments that maybe you're not used to? Did that make the writing process different than you're used to?
Well, it actually made it really interesting for me and challenging. There's another word. I found this process challenging for me, and I think that was healthy. It didn't feel like, oh, this is easy.
Right.
You're right. For me, a lot of it, and I had an awesome group of musicians, to work with in Nashville. A lot of them were legendary players and incredible session musicians. And Larry Beard there from the other side of the railway tracks in Nashville. Larry and his family have an awesome little studio, and I basically work with this sort of family unit of people, all know each other, and they helped hugely for what I was trying to do. And I think it was kind of interesting because I think they began to wonder, what are you trying to do, Andrew? Because when I started recording, and there's some of the songs that I've tracked there that I haven't released too. There's a lot of work that I've done that's still, like my EP that came out, and that was because of the pandemic.
Hmm.
The first thing that happened to us all in life is that with the pandemic is you worry about your health, your family, your job. You don't worry about Andrew Farriss's album. That was why I stopped trying to put it out. And I thought, what do you do with this? Your first plan is to change your plan, right?
Yeah.
You know,
And what was the thought about the timing now? Because the pandemic isn't over by any means. So, what was the thought in the timing of putting it out now?
Well, I think that, I believe in the positive. I believe that, positive things happen if you do positive things. And that, I think the world's realized that, we're in a new frontier, if you like. And I'm not just talking about technology frontier. I'm talking about with the pandemic, that's a new frontier for the world, just like the old West was a frontier world. And I think but I think slowly a lot of people are getting on top of it. And I think that's a very important thing. I hope everyone's okay out there.
And are you really looking forward to the chance of getting out there and touring with this and getting back on the road? When was the last time that you were on the road for any sort of time?
Well, actually, I started playing live around about January of 2020, before the pandemic really kicked in. I was on my way out the door with
Oh,
a
okay.
band to go touring. And now I've put that band back together again. Awesome musicians, girls and guys. And if you want to check out what we're doing, you can go to my YouTube channel, andrewfarriss.com. And we recorded a live concert. It's just the EP set, the LP set. We're still in post production with the visual because it was filmed as well as recorded.
Oh,
But you
okay.
can watch what we did during lockdown in Sydney in a studio at 301 Studios. And so if people are curious to see what I'm doing live, they can go watch that and they'll get an idea of what we're going to do. That's the band basically I'm taking out. So,
And
yeah.
so the LP will be up on your YouTube as well at some point, a performance of the entire LP.
Yeah, we're just working out the visual part of it now. It's not easy to look good. But then again, the Rolling. I'll take a quote. I think from the Rolling Stones: "If you sound good, you look good."
And so, what does the future hold? Like, I've heard you say that right now for you, family is the most important. And like you said before in the interview, if you're not happy, then you have to look at it and say, okay, what am I doing? Do I really want to be doing this? And so, as the future moves on, you seem like you're happy, and this project is really creating something with you, some energy.
Well, absolutely. And the other thing is that I have to make sure that people are enjoying what I'm doing. And if they're into what I'm doing, that'll be encouraging for me to keep doing it. If people shrug off whatever I'm doing, then I'll say, well, that's cool. I'll go do something else. It's pretty, I mean, it sounds a bit basic, but that's the way I look at it. And plus, I hope restrictions can ease for us all around the world with travel, and it's not, a continuing nightmare experience. But I'd love to come and play for you guys over there somehow, sometime soon.
Yeah, definitely. And how different is it, the feedback these days as opposed to the INXS days? Because that back then you didn't have social media, you didn't necessarily have that connectedness to the entire world. So now that you have that, how different is that for you as a musician as opposed to back then?
Right. Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I've talked a little bit about that recently. I think all I can say is for young people, I think it's fantastic. I think for this younger generation of people, it's a wonderful thing because they can make their music, for example, in a bedroom or on a laptop or something, and then that can go out all around the world. And then, they can go, when they could, get off a plane in another country and everybody knows who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually incredible. Those bridges, those cultural bridges and musical bridges are really quite amazing because of technology and electricity and all the rest of it. But in the older days, when us guys, with the INXS guys, were doing what we were doing, we'd go to say do a US radio interview, and they go, "You guys from Austria?" And then we're from Australia, this kind of stuff, and nobody knew, we were all just foreigners and strange people with strange accents. Whereas the world's a bit small like that now because of the internet and whatever, and everything's instant. It's just right there, and so you don't have to physically do so much, like most of our journey when we were younger was always physical. You physically had to do everything, you couldn't let electronics do it all for you.
Yeah, exactly. It's a much different time. And I heard you say in an interview that your fifth album with INXS, that hit really well in America, Listen Like Thieves, when that hit and you got the phone call, you had this feeling like it wasn't like jubilant. It was more like, is this it? Like, I've been building up my entire life to be successful, to find the success, and now I have it. And that feeling of, is this it? Is this the pinnacle? And so I wanted to ask if you ever were able to internalize that, and if you ever sort of figured that out emotionally in moving past that.
Well, first of all, you're lucky if anyone likes you at all.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, they're personal sort of moments in a sense where that experience you're talking about, was INXS's fifth studio album. And we'd had hits prior and, in different countries, including Australia and around the world, and top 40 hits. And I remember, off our first international release album, which was Shabu Shabar, I remember Bruce Springsteen covered Don't Change when he came out to Australia and all this sort of thing. And so we knew that we were gaining more and more attention, but it was that fifth album with that song, What You Need. And then Michael and I both talked about it and we went, how do you feel about that? Going top 5 in North America. And we were sort of talking about it. And I said, I feel really uncomfortable about it. And he said, yeah, so do I. And when we worked out why, it was because, like you said, is that the highest pinnacle of what we've done? This is that moment, And then we both thought, well, going into Kick, the album that followed, we have to do better than that. We actually have to come up with a whole album of that, and virtually we kind of did that. We had top five, international hits off Kick, off that album, because the two of us wrote all the songs on it and we just worked really hard to try and better what we'd already done. But I think all of that mountain climbing, as I said before, all this business, it's nice just to be cruising along right now, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, and with the songwriting, you've been doing it so long, and like you say, you have such a library behind you that do you put a lot of pressure on yourself when you're doing the writing, or because you have fun with it and because you enjoy it, is there not necessarily that pressure that you have, especially when you were writing your new album?
Yeah, right. I think I load the pressure on myself rather than letting other people load it on me. That's one lesson I learned from the first time around. You know, is that you get a lot of people, you know, and it's in their interest for you to keep doing things, you know, not
Right.
necessarily in your best interest as an artist. And I recognize as I'm going into this thing, I've got to keep my, you know, I've got to be looking around me, you know, behind me and see what's going on, make sure that my life is going along the way I want it to go along, you know, and there, yeah, then it'll be really enjoyable, you know.
And has that been a big thing throughout your career in being able to manage expectations yourself and not having other people manage those expectations for you?
Well, expectations is an interesting thing. Often the thing we think is going to happen in life is not necessarily what happens. I haven't met anyone yet that can predict with some accuracy what is going to happen all the time. Look at the pandemic. So you have to have a certain amount of flexibility in life to be able to get through life. And as my dad used to say, no one gets through life without help from other people. You know?
And are your brothers still a part of any of your music, like in the writing or in the production or anything like that?
No, they're not actually. But I saw my younger brother John the other day. He's got a beautiful farm he lives on, and he didn't want this silky oak tree, so he went down and got his truck and he dug it out and put it in a pot for me, and I've planted it where I live, and it's growing. You know, look, I miss my brothers and I miss those guys in INXS. We don't have these sort of dreadful bust up things and all the rest of it. We get on well. We're family and we're mates, and it's all good. You know, I don't want a problem. They don't either. You know, so and I miss playing with them. A great band. You know, a really amazing band of musicians, and you know, but yeah, look, I'm doing my own thing, and if those fellas want to turn up, I'd love to see them. You know.
And so what's the future hold? Because I think I heard you say that you have a catalog of like 200 songs that you've written over the past few years. So do you have plans to be creating more LPs in the next few years?
Well, yeah, I'll just sort of steady as she goes with that. I mean, I've had the EP with a 5-track EP out, but I now have my LP out as of last
Hmm.
Friday, which has 12 completely new tracks on it. And so, yeah, and it's a whole different thing than the EP I had out. So there's a total of 17 songs and pieces of music that I've released really in a fairly short space of time, I suppose.
Hmm.
But yeah, I've got more songs. I've always worked like that. I remember, I think it was the song New Sensation on the Kick album that I'd actually written the music for back in 1982.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and someone said, one of the record producers that the band had worked with said he sort of felt sick because he said, I didn't know you had that song. I said, well, you didn't ask me, you know.
And so do you have others like that come up now when you're in this process, when you had this album with your producers? Was there anything that came up that you weren't necessarily thinking of using, but that came up and they were like, oh, well, why aren't we using that?
Well, yeah, I produced my own album this time around because I had a definite idea of what I wanted to do. But next time around, I might actually get a record producer. Sure, I just don't. I just don't want to suddenly become, I don't know how to put it. I want to stay true to the what I'm doing at the moment, which is exploring culture and trying to connect. I'm trying to make my lyrics all flow in between each other. And in the old
Hmm.
school, I know it's old fashioned, but having an album idea where I flow my lyrics between all the different songs so that it's almost like a concept thing, rather than, oh, okay, I've got these 12 individual pop songs. So I'm, in a music genre, could be country, rock, or whatever it is, or, whatever music genre. I'm not that worried about that anymore. I'm just interested in exploring something else at the moment. Yeah.
And is that a nice place to be in just being able to take that idea that's in your head and just take it to fruition yourself and have it exactly the way you want it to be?
Well, fortunate is a word that comes to mind. And also, I take very seriously cultures, like I was saying to you before. I have family and friends all over the world, but I have family in, US and England and in Australia. And, yeah, I've worked in 52 countries, and I take other cultures very seriously. But the part that I think is interesting is we've only got one Earth, and we all have to live on it together. And you can't eat a smartphone.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. The LP is out now. The EP is out now.
Yeah, good on you. Thanks for talking to me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time, and good luck. And we hope to see you on the road soon.
All right. See you later, man.
Okay, we'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you guys once again so much for listening. We truly do appreciate it. And thank you to Andrew for stopping by and offering up a few minutes of his time. We know he is super busy right now with a lot of press and other things going on with his new album. So we truly appreciate him sitting down with us. You can stream his new album wherever you stream your music. It's his self-titled full-length debut. Please also make sure to follow, share, like, subscribe to us on whatever streaming service you are listening on, and be sure to hop over to social media as well and give us a follow. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok. You can just search The Music Made Me and we should pop up. Thank you once again for listening, and we'll see you next time on The Music Made Me.